Good evening, everybody. I'm going to call the Assembly Committee on Judiciary to order. Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod. Here. Assemblywoman Cohen. Assemblywoman Gonzalez. Here. Assemblywoman Hanson. Assemblywoman Hardy. Assemblywoman Kasama. Here. Assemblywoman Krasner. Here. Assemblywoman Marzola. Here. Assemblyman Miller. Here. Assemblywoman Wynn. Here. Assemblyman O'Neill. Assemblyman Orentlicker. Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong. Here. Assemblyman Wheeler. Chair Yeager.
Here, please mark Assemblyman O'Neill absent excuse. He is presenting a bill in Senate Legislative Operations Committee, and I think he'll be up here as soon as he can. Good evening. Welcome to the night version of Assembly Judiciary Committee, and welcome to the Sunday version. I don't think we've had either of those so far this session, but I missed you all so much since yesterday's meeting that here we are again. As I noted, we do have a quorum, and I want to say good evening to those joining us here, to those who might be watching on the internet. Just a couple of quick housekeeping matters. If you could please silence your devices, and then if we could just be nice to each other, that's probably adequate for today. So committee, you'll see that we have one bill on our agenda for this evening. We just received this bill on the floor a couple of hours ago, so that is why we are here this evening. And at this time, I will open the hearing on Senate Bill 164 in its second reprint. That bill revises provisions relating to prostitution. We have Chair Scheibel joining us this evening to go over the bill. So welcome, Chair. We'll give you a chance to present, and then I'm sure we'll have a lot of questions. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Yeager. I'm Melanie Scheibel, Senator for District 9 in the southwest part of Las Vegas. Thank you so much for having me here tonight. And, I do appreciate the whole committee reconvening for another meeting. And I'd like to think it's just for me, but I know that actually I would not have asked you guys to come back into this room and hear another bill, especially from me, if I didn't think that it was worthwhile policy and actually important for moving our state forward. What SB 164 does is it makes some improvements to the statute covering prostitution so that we can do a better job of combating sex trafficking and human trafficking here in the state of Nevada. It's a topic that we've covered a lot this session. We've covered it a lot in every session because it continues to persist in Nevada despite the many very caring and devoted people, organizations, agencies that are fighting it on the ground. So I will not bore you with the long journey of SB 164 and how it came to be in its current reprint, and I will suffice to say that something that everybody could agree on was that we were not able to collect adequate data on how many people were being arrested in the state of Nevada for engaging in prostitution, and how many people were being arrested in the state of Nevada for soliciting prostitution, where the distinction is that someone who engages in prostitution is offering sexual services for money or a thing of value, and a person who is soliciting prostitution is paying money or offering a thing of value for sexual services. In other words, we weren't able to separate out customers and sellers when we were looking backwards at data. And so this is a very simple fix, a very easy way for us to start gathering that data by bifurcating the statute and creating two separate statutes, one for buyers and one for sellers, so that if you are arrested pursuant to what will be the new section of Chapter 201, we know that you were arrested for being accused of selling sex, and if you were arrested under what still remains as 201.354, you were arrested for being a customer of prostitution. And that should help us to get a better handle on the problem that we're facing, as well as understanding law enforcement's response to it. It does not change any of the definitions of prostitution. It does not change any of the penalties. It does not change which acts would be considered criminal and which acts would not. Again, it simply provides us with a different statute number, which will mean a different knock code, which means that we will be able to retrospectively better understand what law enforcement has been able to do. It makes one other small policy change, which is that the language that was taken from subsection 3 of NRS 201.354, which was the definition of prostitution for the seller, which is now being made into a new section, is also updated so that we use the term person instead of the term prostitute. where the statute used to read, if a law enforcement officer gives a citation to a prostitute, it will now read, if a law enforcement officer issues a citation to a person who is violating this subsection of the law, which I think has, in my conversations on this bill, which as I noted, started out as something very different, all of us agreed that that language was outdated and unnecessary. And in all of our work to combat human trafficking, it was something that we had simply, for lack of a better term, never gotten around to. So when this bill became available for that purpose, I thought it was worthwhile to call all of you back in here at 5 p.m. the night before sine die to agree and make those changes to the law so that moving forward we can get a better handle on sex trafficking in Nevada. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chair Scheibel. And before I take questions, I'll just note for the record there was some discussion before we had this hearing today about one of the provisions in the bill that's not really touched by what this bill seeks to do, but I think it's worthwhile to get on the record. On page 6 of this bill, section 5, there is a section there that imposes a penalty on somebody, and I think, and legal counsel could confirm, that Senate Bill 275, which has, I think, passed both houses of the legislature and on its way to the governor, would repeal Section 5. So I just want to make clear that even though we see that Section 5 language in this bill, assuming the governor approves Senate Bill 275, which I believe is on his desk, that section will be repealed, and having it in this bill doesn't replace it in any way whatsoever. So questions, committee members. This may be your last chance to ask questions. Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm gonna try and do the former Speaker Kirkpatrick's question. This is a really good bill, right? It's a really good bill.
Yes, it is so good this microphone won't even work.
Okay, we have a couple more questions. We'll go next to Assemblywoman Kasama and then Assemblywoman Gonzalez.
Thank you so much. Yes, this is a good bill. My question is under section 4, where you have it as unlawful for a customer. And I didn't see under section 3 where it was defined, because I want to make sure that we capture the person. I'm just concerned with customer. Does if somebody's just soliciting but they haven't paid money yet, what, you see what I'm saying? That if somebody's just soliciting, we still want to capture them, even if there's no exchange of money yet. So how do we make sure we capture the buyer in this case by making sure that it's all inclusive under that term?
Thank you so much, Melanie Scheibel, for the record. And so in section 4, I think if you look down to subsections 2 and 3, actually all of the rest of the subsections utilize the term person instead of customer. The only place where we've replaced person with customer is in the very first line. And I did have a conversation with legal and drafting about that. And it's mostly a stylistic choice, but because the purpose of the bill is to separate out the two statutes, we wanted to make it clear that this statute would become the, quote, customer statute. And so the purpose is not to develop a definition of a customer that, they have paid money or have not paid money, but simply to indicate that it's not a person who is offering sex for a thing of value, but somebody who is seeking it.
So my concern is, I want to make sure we do capture the person. So my concern is, what happens if this is challenged later and somebody says, well, money wasn't exchanged, so they're no longer a customer, so it's not, this section is not valid. That's my concern, is just making sure that we clearly capture the person.
So Melanie Scheibel, again, for the record, as I read this bill, and as I'm looking at section 4, subsection 2, and subsection 3 are the ones that actually define the acts that would be considered unlawful. So, like in subsection 2 is soliciting a child or an officer posing as a child, which also I should note, this chapter is also changed by an assembly bill that you guys heard with a number that I don't remember.
Is it Senate bill or AB?
It was an assembly bill. I think it was 64, maybe? Doesn't matter. Not the point here. So those two subsections, subsections 2 and subsections 3, it doesn't say a customer who violates these provisions. It says a person who violates these provisions.
Okay, I do see what you mean. I just really want to make sure that it's captured. So I don't know if going back to person is better. I'm the legal is not my expertise. I just want to make sure that we, capture person.
I'd be happy to have legal weigh in if they are interested.
Yeah, we can go to Mr. Wilkinson.
Thank you.
I think he has a thought on this that he can share with the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, the scope of the crime that's covered, the elements of the crime is not being changed. Customer is actually the term that's used in the existing law. If you scroll down through that section, you'll see subsection 6, which turns into subsection 5, says a customer who violates this section. And there are other references in NRS to a customer, so we're not changing how the statute applies now in this bill.
Okay, I just want to put on the record that we make sure we capture them, so thank you.
Next up, Assemblywoman Gonzalez.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you, Senator, for bringing this bill. You kind of touched on it in the beginning, how this bill has gone through a lot of revisions, and I am a co-sponsor of this bill, and I was very excited, I think, for the original bill, and so I was just curious kind of like what happened from the original bill to the you're laughing, so I imagine the answer may be maybe a little long, but I just want to make sure the intent of the bill is still what you intend the bill to be, because I think it is very different from the first bill that I had originally read. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the question. Melanie Scheibel for the record. And I view this bill as laying the groundwork to accomplish some of the goals that were set forth in the original SB 164. Originally, SB 164 would have provided immunity and safe harbor to people who were engaged in sex work in a variety of different situations. And the intent of the bill was to ensure that if somebody was being sex trafficked or being trafficked and they were caught up or swept up in an undercover type operation, that at the very outset they were never arrested and never entered the criminal justice system. That is, of course, a very, very long and involved process, and so it wasn't as simple as just one bill to say law enforcement, and I think my colleagues behind me will talk about this. It's not as easy as telling law enforcement officers don't arrest victims because they don't wear, scarlet letters on their chest. And so developing a system, developing a tool to identify victims and to do that accurately and then to treat them appropriately was going to be a very large undertaking, which is why this bill also at one point in its metamorphosis became a study. And I was very excited to engage in that study, and I still look forward to working with our partners in law enforcement and with service providers and with members of the community on answering those questions. But it turns out that we are restructuring our interim committees this year, and we're not doing interim studies this year. So that iteration of the bill also became less tenable. And so that was when, I asked myself, okay, I still have this vehicle. I'm not interested in pushing it just to push it, but is there anything when we go into the interim to have this conversation that I'll say to myself, gosh, I wish we had just done this one thing before we left session so that we could start doing a better job of having those conversations. And it was talking to law enforcement, talking to survivors of sex trafficking, talking to people who have been through the justice system who said, yeah, we need the information on who's being arrested, when and where, and if we can't figure that out just based on, that code right now, the 201.354, or sorry, I think I said it wrong. You know what I'm talking about. 354. What if we just divided it into two separate statutes? And so I asked my partners in law enforcement about it. They said, sure, no problem. And so it seemed like a pretty easy, relatively, easy way to at least lay the groundwork to get better data, to have the conversation, to move towards protecting victims better, and ensuring that we are arresting people who are actually committing crimes and not arresting people who are not.
Thank you so much for that explanation. I think a few of us were wondering, so I really appreciate that and appreciate the work on this bill and hope to work with you on that in the interim. Thank you.
Assemblywoman Cohen.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I have a question about data and information that would be helpful. So the thing, for instance, that I can think of is, wanting to know how many of the buyers, let's say, are from out of town versus how many are residents, that type of stuff. Are we going to be able to get that by doing this, or is that still going to be having to comb through all the arrest records, that if there's someone, an academic or someone who works with an organization that helps traffic victims, that they're actually just going to have to like comb through arrest record after arrest record to get that and more information?
Melanie Scheibel, Senate District 9 for the record, and this is not a data collection bill. This does not require law enforcement agencies to collect any data, and so the answer to your question would depend on the law enforcement agency, and it would depend on the person gathering the data. I imagine that some law enforcement agencies have, for lack of a better term, a database that includes the name, the offense, and where the person lives. Other law enforcement agencies maybe do not. Some might have age and sex in there as well. But the point is that if the very first piece of data, what the offense is, can't be determined without going into the arrest record, then you are talking about having an academic comb through thousands and thousands of arrest records to figure out if this person was arrested because they were accused of selling or buying. And I hope that helps to answer the question.
It does, thank you.
Do we have additional questions? Assemblyman O'Neill, do you have any questions? I know you were interested in this bill. We started without you, so I'm sorry about that. But if you have questions, please go ahead.
Hopefully I talked to the senator. Thank you, Chair, I should say. I spoke with Senator just beforehand, and I'll just confirm, I'll make this a question. I confirmed that our conversation was appropriate. The change was made.
No changes have been made since I walked into this room.
Well, then I'll ask, the question that I had, we talked about was in Section 2, Sub 1, starting right on line 4, it's unlawful for a prostitute to engage in prostitution. I had said that's like saying that
Yes.
it's unlawful for a robber to commit a robbery, a murderer to commit a murder, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes, thank you. Melanie Scheibel for the record, and I'm happy to clarify this a little bit further. So currently in law, the term prostitute is a chapter-wide definition. And so this bill does not remove the chapter-wide definition because it is utilized in a number of different statutes, like our sex trafficking statute and our involuntary servitude statute. And so we're starting small here, and we're just removing that definition and that terminology from the section, not the chapter. Because we're not removing it from the whole chapter, the legal drafter and I had a conversation about whether or not it made sense to leave the term prostitute in the very first line. And this also goes back to Assemblywoman Kasama's question about leaving the word customer in the very first line of subsection 2, and determined that because the chapter-wide definitions weren't changing, we were going to leave them in the first 2 sections to make sure that when you read the chapter as a whole, it's clear that you're talking about the same crimes, but after that one line, the rest of it should appear a person who violates this subsection, et cetera, et cetera.
That was my main question. Thank you, Chair. Can I just pontificate for a minute? I've got to say, we were doing this back in the 70s when I was working Vice in narcotics, and we didn't have great success, but it was a great opportunity. It's like the seashell story. If you just save one, it's worth it. And so I really do support, I think this is a great bill, and I thank you for bringing it forward.
Thank you, Assemblyman Miller. Did you have a question? I thought I saw somebody up here put their hand up. No? Okay. Okay. Maybe someone's stretching. I don't know. Are there other questions from committee members? This might be the last chance you have to ask Chair Scheibel a question. Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Yeager and Senator Scheibel. Thank you for bringing this. So just so I'm clear, the whole purpose at this point is just to divide this chapter and have two separate charges, one for the customer, one for the seller. No data collection yet, but we're hopeful. Okay, that's all I need to know. Thank you.
Melanie Scheibel, for the record, I was nodding my head because that is correct, yes.
Okay, last call for questions. Anybody else? I hear there's a hockey game going on. And just so you know, it's not going well for our guys either at the moment. Yeah, sorry. So, okay, I don't see further questions. Chair Scheibel, thank you for presenting. We'll ask you to sit tight for a moment. We'll take some testimony on the bill, and then we'll have a chance for wrap-up testimony. So at this time, I'll open up for testimony in support of Senate Bill 164. Looks like we have some folks coming forward here in Carson City. Director Callaway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Chuck Callaway for the record, representing the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. We are in support of the bill. Thank you.
And that is how it is done on day 119. Thank you, Mr. Callaway. Mr. Solferino, please go ahead.
Chair Yeager, Vice Chair Nguyen, members of the committee, Corey Solferino representing the Washoe County Sheriff's Office here in support of the bill. We want to thank Senator Scheibel for being a champion of this effort and working with us diligently throughout the process. And to put some of the committee members' minds at ease, our NIBRS data and our teams that are currently working in the human exploitation and trafficking realm are really taking the statistical data. So you guys will have that data, and this will just help in that effort. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you so much. Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Chair Yeager, members of the committee. My name is John Jones here on behalf of the Nevada District Attorneys Association. Just here to say ditto.
Thank you so much. Still taking testimony here in support. I see Ms. Birchie coming forward. Mr. Pirro, I feel like we need entrance music for you with that entrance. The seat opened up and in you came into the room. So welcome to the two of you, and whoever would like to start, please go ahead.
Good evening, Chair Yeager and members of the committee. This is Kendra Birchie with the Washoe County Public Defender's Office. I'd like to hope you know that at this point. I just want to, again, echo my support, and I really look forward to continuing the hard work that Senator Scheibel has started on this issue, and hopefully we can come back next session with some additional bills regarding this very important topic. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Pirro.
John Pirro for the record from the Clark County Public Defender's Office. Thank you, Chairman. And thank you for holding this hearing. We think this is a very important measure. I think you've heard throughout the session that Nevada is one of the worst states when it comes to human trafficking, which is a serious problem. So there are some studies that need to be done, and we thank Senator Scheibel for bringing this issue up. We also are employing her as well because there are sex workers that do want to be part of the discussion, to include them in the discussion on this bill. So when we're thinking about measures that come before this body next session, everybody's included in that discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pirro. I believe everyone in the room has testified at this point, so we will go to the phone lines, please, BPS, to see if there's anybody there who'd like to offer testimony in support.
Good evening. Thank you, Chair. For callers wishing to testify in support of Senate Bill 164, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. And we will begin with caller with the last 3 digits of 918. Caller, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you. My name is Leanne McAllister, Leann, MC, capital ALLISTER. I'm the Executive Director of the Nevada Chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics. Today, I'm happy to offer support on behalf of the Nevada AP for SB 164 and ditto. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony, Ms. McAllister. BPS, are there additional callers in support, please?
For callers wishing to testify in support of Senate Bill 164, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no further callers in support on the line.
Thank you, BPS. I'll close testimony in support. Again, everyone in the room has already testified in support. So We'll go to opposition, and again, there's no opposition in the room. We don't have anyone on the Zoom. BPS, could we go to the phone lines to see if there's anyone there in opposition, please?
Thank you. For callers wishing to testify in opposition of Senate Bill 164, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in opposition on the line.
Thank you, BPS. We'll close opposition, and we will go right back to BPS for any neutral callers on the telephone, please.
For callers wishing to testify in neutral of Senate Bill 164, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, the public line is open and working. However, there are no callers on the line for neutral at this time.
Thank you, BPS. I will close neutral testimony. Chair Scheibel, it is your time for concluding remarks.
Thank you, Chair Yeager. I considered coming up in public comment instead, but I thought I would use a personal privilege to thank you all so much for your indulgence and allowing me to present to your committee so many times in the Senate. I obviously chair our Judiciary Committee and I sit on our Natural Resources Committee, but I think I may have attended more Assembly Judiciary Committee meetings than Senate Natural Resources. So thank you all for being so welcoming and working with me throughout this year, and I look forward to working with all of you in the interim and in the years to come on all of the important issues that we've discussed. And thank you, Chair Yeager, my Assembly member, for chairing such a fantastic committee that does the great work for the people of the state of Nevada. So thank you. Oh, and please do pass SB 164.
Thank you so much, Chair Scheibel. Appreciate your flexibility today. We'll close the hearing on Senate Bill 164. How do we feel about a work session, committee?
I'd move to do pass.
Okay, we are in work session and we have a motion to do pass. First, let me ask this. Are there any questions on Senate Bill 164? Okay. So we have a motion to do pass from Vice Chair Wynn. I think we had like 12 people make a second, but I think I heard Assemblywoman Marzola, so we'll give her the second. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Congratulations, Chair. This bill should hit the floor here this evening, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you. So, committee, we still do have public comment because we had a meeting here, so let me, floor statement. Did you want the floor statement, Assemblyman O'Neill? Is that what you were volunteering for?
I'll take it.
Not that we're doing them, but if you feel so moved to make a floor statement, we will.
We're not doing them anymore.
Okay.
We'll do them together.
Everybody on the committee can do a floor statement on this if they'd like. So. Okay, so we're going to move to public comment. Again, 30 minutes for public comment, 2 minutes per speaker. Public comment's a time for matters of a general nature within the jurisdiction of the Assembly Judiciary Committee. Nobody left in the room with us. BPS, do we have anyone on the phone for public comment?
Thank you, Chair. For callers wishing to provide public comment, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. For callers wishing to provide public comment, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. We will begin with caller with the last 3 digits of 556. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Anne Marie Grant, Annemerie Grant, sister of Thomas Purdy, who was murdered by Reno Police and Washoe County Sheriff's Office during a mental health crisis. I just want to thank all the members of the committee for their hard work, and police reform doesn't end when this session ends. There's people out here like my family who are counting on you to continue your efforts for change, and I appreciate your efforts this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Grant. We appreciate you participating so often in the meetings, and we hope you have a good evening as well. BPS, are there additional callers for public comment?
Chair, the public line is open and working. There are no further callers for public comment on the line.
Thank you, BPS. I will close public comment. Committee members, when we met yesterday, we didn't know if we'd have another meeting. We did indeed have another meeting. There is an agenda for tomorrow. I don't know if we're going to have a meeting. We'll see. Stay tuned. But for now, again, want to thank all of you for your hard work. Thank our staff for their hard work. And as we move into tomorrow, which you all know is Memorial Day, I would just ask that as we do our work here, we think about those who have been lost serving our country and their family members, and hold them in high regards as we are able to do this work in the legislature because of people like that that have fought to defend our way of life and our freedoms in this country. So as we go into tomorrow, I would ask you to keep them in your thoughts and prayers. We may see you tomorrow on this committee, we may not, but nonetheless, we're going to see a lot of each other on the floor in the next, 24 hours or so. And until then, I hope you all have a great night and a great day tomorrow. This meeting is adjourned.